it better? Maybe. All right, yeah, all right. I see some excitement. I like it. We're gonna get started. Okay, so today we are doing Spain, España. We're doing reds. So we have 2 reds today, and today is the 28th. 2 reds. One of them is our Garnacha, also known as Grenache. In your box, it'll be kind of a golden color, just the label that this producer uses. It's a cool grape, and we're going to get into it. And then the other bottle is going to be a Rioja, which is also a slender bottle, pretty skinny. We call it a Bordeaux bottle, just because that's the traditional way made in Bordeaux. And so some skinny bottles, but I think we're going to be impressed by what they have inside. So why don't we get on started? So Spain, the Iberian Peninsula, has Portugal and Spain. The history of winemaking there goes back a long time. They were making grapes, they were making wine since the time of Rome. During the when the Islamic Caliphate kind of took over, they stopped making as much wine. But once kind of medieval Europe came about, and you had the Renaissance, and you had a lot of going on, you had this growing interest in wine, and then it kind of comes into fruition, especially after you get some French vineyards and winemakers coming to Spain. So the plan for today, we're going to talk about the grapes briefly. We're going to talk about Spain. Then we're going to pop them in the fridge. It'll only take 10 minutes. Then we're going to take them out of the fridge, and then we're going to drink them. It'll be a little quicker than usual because I think I've been a little slow. And I think we're trying to find that balance between too much content and too little. And so I think today will be a nice balance. So today's varietals are grapes that do really well in hot places. Spain is hot. It's kind of a more southerly latitude, more southern latitude. And so it's going to be a little warmer there than it is in France. One grape that we're not tasting today, a white that you can look for in the future, is Albarino. It'll be labeled as Riojas Bajas. It is, really great with seafood. You have that lemon zest flavor. You have some salinity coming from the Atlantic breeze. And I highly recommend it if you get the chance to in the future. And because we're not drinking it, I have to just include a video just so I can say we know something about it.
Galicia is the north of Spain, is the green part of Spain. Thank you to our climate condition, we have high precipitation with a lot of rains, and also because the ocean that gives us a mild climate.
Most of the people in Spain have, like me, black hair, black eyes. And here in Galicia is a lot of people with red hair. And here is the typical in Galicia is the Celtic people. And it's very similar comparing with Irish people, Scottish people.
And Galicia is special because our culture, and also because our seafood, our fish, and all the traditions that are around the vineyard and the ocean.
Northwest Spain is dominated by white wines, which pair well with the abundance of fresh seafood and fish from the Atlantic coast.
We have a lot of seafood. For us, it was a part of our gastronomy, a part of our way to live. We have very different kinds. Like lobsters, like clams, squids. We have octopuses. Here, the wines, they have the taste of the sea. And I think they are a nice combination in between the fish and the wine.
So there is white wine being made in Spain. We are focusing on the red wine, but the white wine, as mentioned, Albarino is classic, and as well as Cava. So Cava is a blend of 3 grapes. None of us have heard of any of them, but they are 3 grapes. What's up, guys? So you got 3 grapes, and they make a sparkling wine in the style of champagne. And so it's going to be more similar to champagne than the Prosecco we had in week 1. This one is a little more traditional. It's a little yeasty. It's a little more bready, biscuity, and it does really well with the seafood, like the dry white wine. So today, the red grapes that we are going to get to eventually is we have Carignan and Monastrell. These grapes do really well in northeast Spain, as well as southwest France, because again, these are warmer climates. So the main event though for today are these two guys. We have Garnacha, known as Grenache. I'm going to use both interchangeably. And then we have Tempranillo, which is also a grape that does really well in Portugal, but it's really known for making Rioja, which is kind of the wine we're focusing on today. It's our second wine. It's kind of like it was the more expensive one of the two. It should be pretty high caliber compared to the other stuff we've had. So I'm pretty excited for it. I don't want to give away too much, but Grenache is a grape where you have a lot of red fruit. So you have that strawberry, raspberry, cherry. It is a little thinner skin, so it's going to be a little lighter in body. But I misspoke. It's actually not going to be lighter in body. It's going to be lighter in color, but in body, it's actually going to be pretty high alcohol. Spain is really hot, so you have a lot of sugar, which a lot of sugar means after fermentation, a lot of alcohol. And so with the Grenache, you are going to be having higher alcohol. At the same time, it is lower in acidity, so you're going to have it, that balance is going to be a little interesting. It's often why they use it in blends, because it is a little, we call it floppy, it doesn't have as much acidity as it has for alcohol. And so it feels a little off balance. And so that's why it is actually the most planted grape in the world. No one's ever heard of it, but it is the most planted grape in the world. It's in everything that you don't see. It's never labeled as a varietal. Like today, we are having one labeled as varietal, and we're going to see its unique features. But I think we're going to realize like it's also in the second wine we have, but it's going to be more hidden, just because the next grape is going to be in the forefront, and that grape is Tempranillo. Tempranillo is named because it ripens pretty early, so temprano, early in Spanish, and you're going to have a lot more of the black character, so black currant and plum, a little bit of red, so like red plum, but still you do have more black. It does really well in the hot and dry climate of northern Spain. So you have Rioja, Ribera del Duero, which is high elevation. So as we said last time, when actually maybe not last time, but when grapes are at higher elevations, they're like us, the atmosphere is thinner, and so they're going to get sunburn. And so what happens is the grape skins get thicker at that higher elevation. So Ribera del Duero is going to be a little bit more tannic a grape than the one we're going to have, even though it's the same species and the same varietal. It just, the growing conditions are a little bit different. And then again, you're going to get a lot of leather notes, which I hope we'll see after. So again, some characteristics of Grenache. We have a bold flavor. It's thinner skinned than Cab, so it's not going to be as astringent as that first week in Italy we had. It's often aged in oak, so we're going to talk about this. And there is kind of a debate whether American oak versus French oak, which country's oak trees are better, and people care for some reason. And so we're going to talk about that. But one thing just to keep in mind, Grenache, some people find it similar to Pinot Noir. It's a little spicier than Pinot Noir. It's a little fuller, but it is similar in some characteristics. And so you may notice that, especially because next week might be Pinot, depending on whether or not we show the recording next week. And then you'll be able to see a direct comparison. Some great Spanish food, pair local with local. So, chorizo, olives, it's really going to, and what they love to use is lamb. So I was watching a video instead of studying micro, and they kill the lamb at day 26, and they do all these things, like these butchers there, and they're really into it, and it ends up tasting really good if you eat meat. Ethically, it's probably a little more, whatever, but it's supposed to be tasty. Some cheeses as well. Spain, some good cheese that do pair with the reds. Just to give a little context, this is the map. We have the Duero. So in Portugal, we're going to call it Douro, but in Spain, we call it Duero. And then as you see, we kind of visited Northwest Spain with that white wine little spiel, but we're going more towards Northern Spain. So we have Ribera, Rioja. And then the other wine that we have, so the first one we're trying is actually near from Barcelona. So that's, again, Northeast Spain, near the border with France, which, the French people think is the reason why it's good, but I don't know. So now we're going to get regional. We talked about the grapes. Now we're a little more geographic context. So as you can see, so we have some isotherms, so areas of the same temperature. And so as you can see in the old world, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but you have Spain, which is, kind of this little boot off the end. It's closer towards that 20 degrees centigrade. So it is warmer. And because of that, these warm varietals are going to do really well. So yes, as I said, there's a long tradition of winemaking in Spain. It started as not maybe the most reputable place. It's a good place to get a good bargain, but it is really recently that it became kind of a place to get quality. So, some would say that it's more for the middle end wine, but if you're eating a tapas at a bar, like there's nothing better. If you're in Spain, there really is no better way. You can't not drink Spanish wine in Spain. It's not heard of. So also Spain makes a lot of wine. They have more vineyards than any other country. They actually don't make the most, but they have the most vineyards just because the way their climate is. It's a little too hot and they don't have that much rainfall. So they don't make the most wine, but they do have the most vine under plow is what we say. But so we're going to break Spain down a little more microscopically. As again, I don't know if you can see, but we have, the different regions and different colors. So for those of you who aren't colorblind, I'm sure you'll enjoy this. Now we have another image. Again, you have Galicia northeast, and then Catalonia so Galicia northwest, Catalonia is northeast. Catalonia on our bottle it says Catalayud, but it's the same. It's just a different word. It's the wine region term for the Catalonia area. And so that's where our wine is going to be coming from. Here's the list of the various denominación or de original. And so the DOs, and, more circles, more maps, so we can pretend we're knowledgeable. So yes, the first place, which I said is around the city of Barcelona, we have the Central Plateau. And it's also apparently near Madrid, so I might be wrong. But I think it is where our first wine is going to be coming from. It is a plateau of Spain. Maybe it is not exactly the Central Plateau, but the Catalonia, it is at a higher elevation than the rest. The second region I just want to mention, Rioja, that is the main event of today. That is, again, northern Spain. And you have Tempranillo really shining here. It is the grape of choice for a lot of these vintners. They call it different things. They call it Tinto Fino. They call it various things in local dialects, just because we have, each place thinks that it started there. And so they have their own word. Even in like Sardinia thinks that they founded Grenache or Garnacha. So they have a different name for it. And I think genetic analyses have shown that it does come from Spain, but these older Sardinian men who are convinced that, their parents were growing it, they were growing it for, a long time. So they're convinced it's from there. But I think a lot of these genetic testing has shown kind of where these grapes are coming from. And so another little diagram just showing what Tempranillo, what to expect and where we're going to be getting from it. So now we're going to talk about a different region, which is very similar to Rioja in that it grows Tempranillo. So it's a different place, but it is a little similar in that it is the same grape. It's still going to be red, black fruit, spice notes with, leather, with mushrooms, with kind of a savory note. It's a little bit of a higher elevation. But this is actually where the most expensive Spanish wine comes from. So this is, if you're looking for that, $350 bottle to get someone and you want to get one from Spain, Bodega Vega Sicilia is, their kind of hall of, it's their wine producer. He makes, I think we'll actually see, he uses American oak because that's just tradition. That's the style that, they've used for a long time. Just, I guess America never asked for independence from Spain. So we kind of traded with them. And so they were on less amicable terms with France. So they didn't really want French imports, such as French barrels. So they imported from America. And now there's just this legacy of American oak being used there. And now you're going to listen to someone in a Spanish accent tell you about it.
Solo tenemos Cabernet Sauvignon y Merlot, que junto con el tempranillo o tinto fino, que se llama tinto fino,
As with Rioja, oak usage is paramount, and the choice of French or American wood creates distinction in the wines.
Il roble americano porque consideramos que hace un conjunto muy curioso. We use French oak.
aquí fundamentalmente en Vega Sicilia nosotros utilizamos dos tipos de robles, roble americano y roble francés. 50 hoy día, 50-50% cada uno.
Regardless of the oak's origins, the Ribera denomination dictates that age-worthy wines from Crianza to Gran Reserva must be aged in wood.
Crianza is the wine. We have 2 years with 12 months of oak at least. Reserva is a wine of 3 years with at least 12 months in oak. And Gran Reserva, that this is a wine. We have 5 years with at least 24 months in oak.
Despite a rich history of the vine, Spain's wine-growing traditions are being pushed forward by modern ideas.
So there is a history there,
Tenemos
and they are pretty passionate about it. And as he mentioned, there are different levels of aging, and that's what we're going to see on the bottle. So on our bottle we're drinking second, which I promise will go into the fridge shortly, it says Reserva 2016. What does that mean? Well, on the slide, it says that it means that it's been aged for a minimum of 36 months, so 3 years it's been aged in the vineyard, so like in the building where they age stuff, and 12 months of those, so 1 year of those 3 was in oak barrels. And so, you know, picture a kind of a picturesque cellar with oak barrels stacked on top of each other. You know, it's dark, it's dank, it's you know, it's kind of an interesting place to not that kind of dank, but you know, it's an interesting place to spend, you know, spend that long a time. And so the wine does show that character. And so we are going to see some of that. And now we're going to listen to a prettier sommelier tell you about the difference between American versus French. Is it just a matter of nationality? We'll find
I
out.
really want to bring your attention to the range of flavors and textures that different types of oaks can bring to wine. Now here we have what's represented for the aromas or components that you get in French oak. You've got vanilla, you've got nutmeg, and a lot of different kinds of spices, brown spices, clove, cinnamon, allspice. You get that from French oak. However, on American oak, it's a bit different. You're going to get much more of a coconut or even a toasted coconut kind of flavor instead. And some people get dill whenever a wine has American oak in it. And here represents a lot of the different things you can get from toasting the barrels, regardless whether it's American oak or French oak. So you can have a light toast, medium toast, or a deep toast, and that's going to be reflected in the flavor that you get inside the wine. Sometimes if it's
So most barrels are going to be kind of that medium to light toast, but you do see different styles being made. So I think now would be a good time to pop our wines in the fridge and for me to set the 10-minute timer, or maybe 11 or 12. But yes, why don't I set the 11 minutes? Let's all take our wines. So we got the Rioja, and then the Garnacha from Northeast Spain going in the fridge. And as we do that, you know, I'm just going to talk about the neighbor. I'm going to talk a little bit about southern France and Portugal, just because it's our only time here. We're in the area. We might as well. So as I said, the Douro River changes names when you get to the Portugal side. And this is actually where they're going to grow a wine that becomes port. So, which I'm sure you've heard of. It's a sweet dessert wine. Jefferson, you know, Thomas Jefferson was drinking it back when he, you know, founded the US. You know, it's pretty historic wine, and it travels really well just because of that higher alcohol percentage. And so Tempranillo, the second wine we're going to have, is actually growing in Portugal, and it's going to go into that port. So that's why I feel justified in describing it. And Portugal, as you know, I want to mention, is also really good value. So Spain, Portugal, you're going to get good value, good bang for your buck. It's a good place to look for a good wine. Portugal's other great grape besides Tempranillo is Touriga. Touriga Nacional is the grape of Portugal, without a doubt. It is the cab of Portugal. It is kind of the backbone of that port blend. And it really is a fantastic wine. And interestingly, with climate change and the whole world getting hotter, that I really think that probably is the grape of the future. Just because it's so drought tolerant, it's so heat tolerant. You're gonna see it's already starting to go in Napa like a lot, and they're making Sine Qua Non is making some, $400 Touriga Nacionals, which are like high quality, and I do see that kind of being the wine of the future. But we're in the present, so I'm going to talk about El Duero. And if we have time, we're going to listen to this guy tell us.
Than the fortified wines, Port and Madeira. Port is usually a red dessert wine, although there are white versions as well. Port is named after the city of Porto, in which the wines usually make their trek to the other parts of Europe. But the wines are grown further inland in the Douro Valley. There are a few different styles of port. The most important is a vintage port, and beyond that, there's also tonic ports and LBP ports and other substyles. Port is a very classic combination with chocolate. Sometimes it also pairs very well with blue cheese, and it's really kind of a very old world way to. Madeira is similar to port in the two most important wines.
Oh no. So I just want to say, so Valentine's Day is coming up. Don't have champagne and chocolate, have port and chocolate. You can get great ruby ports or LBV ports. They will pair great with chocolate. Do not serve champagne with chocolate. That's party foul. Okay.
And what differentiates port from a normal wine is that we will take the grapes, and if you were to make a red wine from these grapes, you would let all the sugar be transformed into alcohol. And the final alcohol of the wine is the initial sugar of the grape. In a port wine, we will take the same grapes, start fermenting, and when half of the sugar has been converted to alcohol, we will run off the juice, and we will add a neutral grape spirit, which will kill the yeast. So the sweetness in the glass of port is a natural sugar from the grape, and the wine alcohol, the spirit that we use, is there to raise your port to an alcohol level of 20%, where it is stable, it has the ability to age. And that's what differentiates port as a wine style to other wines.
Although port wine bears the name of the seaport city of Porto, it is actually in the steep hillsides of the Douro Valley in northern Portugal that it has been made for centuries. The region was legally demarcated by the Portuguese government in 1756, meaning that authentic port can only be made here.
The Douro Valley is characterized by a region of mountain culture in hot climate. The summer temperatures are very high, get up to 40 degrees centigrade on a regular basis, and our winters are cold. We have low rainfall, so it's very arid. And it is in these conditions that leads to the vineyards and grapes producing naturally high sugar levels and a lot of concentration of color. Most of the local indigenous varieties, named like Touriga Francesa, de Rolige, these are varieties which are naturally very drought resistant.
So one little fun fact is that when they make port, they gather around, they play kind of the Portugal national anthem, and they all stomp. So this is barefoot. I mean, I don't know what type of microorganisms are involved, but it's the old-fashioned way of just stomping on the grapes. There is no mechanization going on here. It's kind of magical. They say nothing can replicate the human foot. In just that, it extracts, that sounds weird, I know, but just that it doesn't, it's not too forceful. It's not like pushing out kind of the too tannic stuff in the grape skins, in the stems. And it really is kind of something that's hard to replicate, that other countries we try to with machines, but in Portugal, they do it the old-fashioned way, and it creates a lot of jobs. So we put our wines in the fridge. We're leaving them there, and then we're also going to leave Spain to go to southern France and just see what wines they make. Okay, southern France. So this is near the city of Marseille, I believe. And these are really the Spanish grapes of France. No one would ever call it that, but these, if you genetically trace these grapes, they are coming from Spain. The place in France that you should know is called the Rhone Valley. It is the southern Rhone in particular, especially a place called Châteauneuf-du-Pape, which is near the city of Avignon, where the Pope went to. So it was the Châteauneuf-du-Pape means, the new house of the Pope. So during the Babylonian captivity, when the church left Rome for various reasons in the 14th century, they came to France and they got into grapes. And we're going to watch a little clip, time allowing. But again, so I want to emphasize that the grapes here are mainly Grenache based. And so a place that you may have heard of, Provence, they make a great rosé. It's pretty well known around the world. It's going to be very close to this place in the Southern Rhone. And it's Provence, they make their rosés out of Grenache. So as I said, it's the most planted grape in the world. It's behind these things that you don't see, such as Provence rosé. The soil is chalky, and wine geeks like talking about soil, so I want to mention that. Now let's listen to a guy with a French accent.
Came central to the Catholic Church when the Pope moved his court from
He
Rome
doesn't have
to
that. I'm
Avignon.
sorry.
I hear about the relationship between the Catholic Church and Châteauneuf-du-Pape. Where does this originate from?
In the 13th century, you have the Pope in Avignon. And during this time, they decided to produce a wine and they plant some vineyard in Châteauneuf-du-Pape in this very special soil with a lot of stone. The Pope was the first to plant the vine in Châteauneuf.
It was the Pope that followed him, Pope John XXII, that constructed his new summer papal palace not far from Avignon. This castle, which today sits still ruined, was titled Châteauneuf-du-Pape, translated literally as the new house of the Pope. Fortunately, the popes that followed were also partial to grape wine, and Châteauneuf-du-Pape became etched in history due to its ability to produce wines of exceptional quality. The appellation of Châteauneuf-du-Pape is the oldest in all of France, and its regulations predate all others. It is also one of just 9 communes in the Côte d'Rône that holds the top classification of cru. Famously, there are 13 grape varieties permitted to produce Châteauneuf-du-Pape wines, with additional clones of 5 of these grape varieties also allowed. Producers are able to use as many or as few of these grape varieties as they want in their blends. That means that a wine labeled as Châteauneuf-du-Pape could be made from just 1 grape variety or all 13. The soils of this appellation are largely made up of sand, gravel, and clay, with large, smooth, quartzite rocks known as pudding stones being famous in the region.
What can you tell me about the unique pudding stones of Côte d'Rône?
So they are the most iconic terroir of Châteauneuf-du-Pape. They work like an insulate layer, storing the heat during the day and creating a very hot and dry atmosphere around the canopy, bringing a very early ripening and at the same time keeping the moisture on the ground. And they are really part of what people expect from Châteauneuf-du-Pape.
With over 3,000 hectares of vineyards across the whole of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, wine can vary massively, with huge differences in soil type and quality from vineyard to vineyard. Today, most Châteauneuf-du-Pape wines have the well-known papal crest embossed on them as homage to the region's heritage.
Why do bottles from Châteauneuf-du-Pape have this emblem embossed on them?
So again, these bottles have an interesting kind of shape, which gives them distinction.
And central.
So now a quick trip to California. There's only 2 minutes left on our timer. So we don't have much time, but I want to mention a place called the Central Coast. So this is 2 hours from LA. This is kind of in between LA and San Francisco. It's warmer there. And so you're going to be growing grapes that do well in Spain, such as Garnacha or Grenache. And so, there's some great wine being made out of specifically Paso Robles, which is some sub-region of the AVA, the Central Coast. And you have some nice districts there. I highly recommend, if you want to go on vacation and you don't want to go abroad, it's kind of an up and coming wine region, which is always more exciting than, kind of the established wine regions. So, I highly recommend, considering to do a trip out there. So I think we are going to watch a video. So there's 1:40 on the timer. So we're going to watch this and then we're going to take everything out.
This is another area of Europe that has a big history with wine. It's in the Nord Stream. That's going to go back to probably 3,000 or 4,000 BC. Spanish wine was relatively rustic up until the mid-1800s when a bunch of Frenchmen showed up in Rioja and basically taught the Spanish how to make wine like they did. With the exception of a corner in the northwest part of Spain, most of Spain is hot and dry. It actually gets hotter and drier as we go from that northwest corner down to the southeast. Thankfully, a lot of these areas are also fairly hilly, so these higher altitude parts actually make it possible to make nicely balanced wines. But a general kind of statement about Spanish wine is that it tends to be a little bit more full-bodied and vivacious and kind of warm-blooded than, say, something from France. Spain's classification system is pretty simple. It's 2-part. There's the DO, the Denominación Origen, and the DOCA, which is Denominación Origen Calificada, which means it's qualified. That's a higher level designation. There are only 2.
So the first wine we're going to have is a DO wine, and the second wine is a DOCA, just because it is a Rioja. So I think now is a good time to take our wines out. So march on over to the fridge. It's funny. So I know some of you are probably, very worried, right? So, we're taking the wines out at the exact same time, but one of them we're drinking first, and the other one is going to get a little too warm before we drink it. And I wanted you to rest assured that it's actually wine serving temperature is very specific to each bottle. And so this second bottle we're having, I would actually serve at a slightly warmer temperature. So that couple of degrees, it is actually going to improve it, not hurt it. So don't worry, just chill. Okay, let's open the Garnache or Grenache. I need a corkscrew. And if you do have any of the foods from the syllabus, if you've read the syllabus, which some people I guess did, you can see and you can try to nibble on some of them. Some just light foods, light cheeses, some crackers, are always at a good spot in a wine tasting. And so this wine is a 2020. So it actually, in terms of the aging rules, it wouldn't even classify as a Crianza. Crianza required, I think it was 24 months. And so this is a Joven. Joven in Spanish means young. So this wine, I'm expecting, I don't want to give too much away, but I'm expecting a young, youthful wine. I'm expecting a lot of berry characters. I'm not expecting kind of, old wine feel from it. I'm expecting kind of youth. I'm expecting kind of a bubbly character that I'm excited for. Let's do it. Okay, so we are pouring. My glassware, it could be a little, you should get nice polish and polish your glassware. It makes a good difference, like mentally, psychologically. But given this unpolished glassware, I am ready to taste. And again, so we taste on a white backdrop, ideally. And so I'm looking for one. I have this one, it's a white backdrop, and then it has a picture of some type of gross thing. But we're gonna look at the other side that is just white. Okay, in terms of color, so we're no longer being as rigid about kind of all the weird categories we've been doing. We're kind of being a little more flexible and fluid. So, you can follow this just because it's good guidance and it gives us a good kind of framework. So I'm using it partially, but I think that we can kind of start freeballing it a little, and gradually we're going to get a little more, artistic with our wine descriptions. All right. And any questions, you can just pop them in the chat or just shout out. So, all right. Any? All right, word. Okay. Okay. So I would say it's clear, clarity wise. I see, I'm looking, I see a clear wine, it doesn't look kind of all gross. It looks like wine. Next, in terms of color, what do we see? This is a young wine. I see a dark ruby. I'm putting my hand underneath and I'm seeing if I can see it. My pale ass fingers, I can't see them. I just almost spilled though. So don't spill. It's embarrassing. You lose points. So, you're looking and I see, so I would say medium to dark ruby. And then in terms of legs, some people like checking out other people's legs. So on the leg wise, I don't see any legs. So legs, they're the things that cling to the side of the glass. I don't see any legs, so I'm not expecting a very sugary, or I'm not expecting a very high alcohol wine. And it makes sense. This is a young Garnacha. This is not going to be a ruby port, so makes sense. Next in our tasting, we're going to talk about the nose. Nose goes. So we can do the chest, chin, nose test just to see intensity. So we put on the chest, put on the chin, then. I got to get the schnog all in there just because I don't have the best sense of smell sometimes. And it is, it's not I will say I was expecting a little more intensive notes. I'm getting a little bit of swirl just because, you know, that's what wine people do. We swirl things. You know, I'm starting to smell it. You know, it's opening up to me. You know, it's kind of a anthropomorphic way of describing a wine. You know, it's a little shy, it's reserved, but it's opening up. So I think it needs a little more time in the glass, but we don't have much time. So, and it's our first wine. In terms of the nose, as I said, I would call it medium minus. In terms of aroma characteristics, I mean, you're definitely getting, let's see. I would say, I mean, it's definitely, I'm getting raspberry, like a wild raspberry, not like a ripe kind of like, almost like I'm not like a raspberry jelly. I'm getting just a wild raspberry, you know, some herbaceous notes in it. Almost like a hibiscus, like or maybe if you've ever like had a raspberry leaf, like, I know these are kind of flowery words, I know, but we just use this vocab just to describe, you know, the wine, just so we have kind of a dialect. They're all organic chemicals, and we're just kind of talking about some trace amounts we might get. So now the moment of truth. I think people are allowed to taste the wine. Okay. So I don't know what people think. So it's a light body. I know people might say like, ooh, that's a little spicy. It is a little bit spicy. You do have kind of those notes of clove, those notes of allspice, but it's not, I would say this is probably average for a Garnacha. So Garnacha is known to have kind of those characteristics just off the bat. It's not from age. It's just like, that's just the grape. It might be coming from the grape skins, it might be coming from, you know, the hot sun. It's part of Grenache. It's part of that spice that does so well with Spanish foods. And so it might be it is like a Pinot, but it might be, some of you might find it's a little too hot or a little too spicy. And that is partly kind of those clove notes, but also the higher alcohol percentage coming from the fact that it is a hotter region. In terms of acidity, you know, I'm not getting a very acidic, I'm not getting kind of a smack on the side of my tongue saying like, oh, this is really lemony. I'm not getting that. I'm more getting the kind of that alcohol, that medium to high body. And in terms of flavors on the taste, I am getting more intricate taste than I was when just the smell. You know, the smell I was getting, you know, wild raspberries. Now I'm getting a little bit, I mean, and notice I'm still smelling, but I mean, I like it. In terms of floral notes, I would say violets. I'm cheating a little bit. I'm looking at the kind of the sheet I gave each group, but I'm definitely getting violets for floral notes. You know, I'm not getting any citrus fruit or stone fruit. You know, it's really predominantly red and some black, a little bramble mixed in. So, you know, as I said, for the wild raspberries, wild raspberries grow on brambles. And so you can kind of almost taste the whole plant. I don't know who is eating plants here, like bushes that have thorns on them, but if you did, I think it would taste like this. And then in terms of herbal notes, I would say, almost like a dill or a fennel. I would say, yeah, in that family. So like a dill, fennel, rosemary family. Not so much thyme, but I'm getting kind of those type of compounds. Not, you know, super much, but I am getting them because they haven't been hidden by that oak age. So some conclusions. I would say in terms of the sheet. You know, we could say, is there development? Is there prunes or tar? You know, no, this is a young wine. We're not getting that. I'm not getting any leather or any forest floor, really. I mean, I got some kind of, what did I get? I got some like wild berry plant notes. So some kind of like foresty notes, but I wouldn't call it forest floor. There's some could. Let's see what the folks who make it say. So they say it's old vines, which people tend to be impressed by. Like humans, we tend to gain knowledge and character over the years. And so older vines tend to make kind of more serious wines. And so they're going to brag about it in the spiel, the paragraph. They're mentioning the slate soils. People love talking about soils. I don't know why, but we do. And so they're talking about it. We're also saying the fresh acidity. I would say it is still medium low on acidity, but it is not so low that it's unbalanced. So like sometimes with Garnacha, you have so much alcohol and so little acidity that it's almost like undrinkable. And so this one, I would classify it as kind of, a pretty standard table wine. It's not going to, fall flat. But yeah, so good value. The guy from Venus said 90 points, pretty good value. I think it was only like 12 or so bucks, like pretty darn good in terms of a daily drinker. So now we are putting that, so now, you can gradually kind of finish drinking that, as you guys kind of like, talk. But I'm going to put that one away for now. You guys can, I would finish what's in your glass. I am going to now start opening the next one. So I would say, nibble on some food, chat it up, and I'm just going to open the next one and get started. And I'm going to play a little video in the background. You don't have to watch it, but you could. I'd like you to, but don't have to.
Of all the world's great varieties, few speak to a single country as decidedly as Tempranillo. It's a beautiful grape variety. I always say Tempranillo is the flavor of Spain. Tempranillo has 40 different names all over the Spanish geography.
It depends on the area. People they put tinta fina, tinta de maíz, toro, tinta de toro. But at the end, it's almost the same grape for location.
Tempranillo is named for its tendency to ripen early. While the grape thrives as far south as La Mancha, the Iberian Peninsula's most planted red grape finds marked distinction in the hills of Rioja and Ribera del Duero. Here, the grape forms the heart of Spain's preeminent red wines.
Rioja is very north of Spain. We are with the border with the Basque Country.
The climate is continental, and what is very important is these mountains. These mountains separate with the Basque Country that makes like a special microclimate.
The growing season in Rioja is long and dry.
And it's not only the climate, it's the soil.
We have a special region with the Ebro River, with the soils, we take darker soils.
But in a very dry country like ours, we need to have soils that can drain very well so that the roots can go deep, lots of meters, and can survive the dryness.
Picturesque villages line the landscape.
Wait, can people hear? Just like question.
Seth, you're muted.
But so no one could hear any videos. Is that true?
We heard all the other ones, just not.
Oh, you did? All right.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right. I was getting all worried. I was like, yo, no one said anything. Like, fuck. All right. Okay. two reds. One of them is our Garnacha. Also
Wait,
known
what-
as
what-
Grenache. In
What the hell's happening?
box, it'll be
Oh my God, it recorded me. Yeah, all right,
Just a
stop this.
label that this bruiser uses.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's not what we want. Thank you for bearing with me on this.
Now let's listen to
Yeah.
Guy with
James
the
Central.
I don't know why I'm hearing myself. All right, so let's go on to the second red. You got a little video, no sound, but basically Grenache and Tempranillo, they blend well together. Tempranillo is going to be the backbone of this wine. This wine is probably more than 80% Tempranillo, and we're really going to see that here. I'm pretty stoked. And as I said, you know, there are different levels of aging. And so, you know, this one is going to be Reserva. So as I said, it's seen 3 years. It's actually also a good vintage. I haven't really mentioned vintages, but, you know, each year is different. And so, you know, each year is kind of, they try to capture that year in a bottle. And so each year is a little different. You know, some years in Buffalo, we get a lot of snow. Some years we get none. And so it is really kind of that winemaker's interpretation of that year. So 2016 in Spain was actually a great year. And so we're hopefully going to see some of that. And if we don't, we're going to have to buy more Spanish wine to eventually find out. So this is the one we're having, the Crianza. Or no, the Reserva. Okay, let's do it. Got a head start on that. I like this already, I will say. So in terms of color and appearance, it's very similar to the last wine. It's similar in terms of the thickness of the grape skin. It's just a very different kind of grape, Tempranillo. And so I would still call this a ruby. I would still call it, medium dark. It is a darker wine in terms of color intensity. And it is clear. Legs, you know, it might actually have a little legs going on. So, you know, it's kind of those streaks on the side of the glass. You know, it does have legs. It's not very informative, but, you know, back in the day, people used to think that that was an indicator of quality. And so, you know, they would mention good legs. But, you know, this wine does have legs, and you could mention that.
What do the legs mean?
So it's actually very interesting. So the legs are, it's an effect that has to do with the viscosity of the wine. So it's like adhesion and cohesion. It's kind of like a meniscus on like a beaker, like in a, so it's like, it's kind of, they're attaching to the side of the glass as strongly as they're attaching to each other. So it's not really, it's kind of like the streaks of liquid on the side of your glass. Some people would call them tears. It's the same thing. You honestly might, so the only reason I'm seeing them is because when I poured it, some of it actually got to the side of the glass. And so that has yet fallen down. It's kind of remaining up there. And it has to do with the room relative to humidity. It's like a lot of effects, but it's a lot of the alcohol content and the level of residual sugar, which kind of makes it either syrupy, and that would make it more likely to show legs. But good question. Keep them going. Now let's give this guy a sniff. It's so different than the last one. It's really like night and day. And what's crazy, because this is probably, 20-30% of the same exact grape. Granted, a different year and a different part of the country, but it's markedly different. I'm getting a lot of savory notes. I don't know if anyone else, I'm getting those characteristics that come with time. And so, I'm getting kind of those cloves, so the barrel stuff. But I'm curious though what other people, I don't want to, superimpose kind of an opinion. So if anyone smells something, I'd love, feel free to shout out. I mean, it smells something other than like grapes, because anyone can say grapes for any wine. But like if you smell something other than like wine, like and just like one detail, I'll probably say you're right. So.
Laura says wood.
Yeah, okay. So that. I mean, it's very true, right? It did see a lot of oak. And so you're having that woody notes. But I mean, I also agree with her that not even just the oak it's seen, in terms of the smell of it, I almost do get like the smell of kind of like a fresh, like pine wood, right? So like not aged pine, but kind of like that, you're going to Home Depot and like you're in that aisle and like you kind of smell some of that. I do get that. I do see what you're saying. And yeah, and so in terms of like other fruits, I would definitely say red currants. I would say cranberries. I would say some. No, I wouldn't say strawberry. Some people would compare it to a Jolly Rancher. This wine, given the age, I wouldn't really say I'm getting a lot of Jolly Rancher notes. But it is a note that people do kind of comment on sometimes with a Reserva Rioja. So I am now going to go on in terms of development. I'd be interested to see how this aged. It probably could last another, 5 or 10 years in the bottle. But life is short, and so we are, I would say it's towards its peak drinking window. They're not expecting you to age it an additional time. That's why they keep it in the winery for so long. So I'm giving it a taste. So this one I would say it's a little sour, more sour than the last one. It's a more tannic. This is more of a food wine, and you do notice that. So the first one I could see it if you chill it a lot, especially I could see you drinking it on the porch. Maybe not midsummer, but I could see it like September, drinking that outside. This wine, I really wouldn't. I would drink this with dinner. I would drink this eating tapas, at a late night, Spanish place. I wouldn't really have this one without food. And so you probably want food right now, and I don't blame you. And so if one of you guys wants to cook or like make something, like I'll watch. No, but like you got someone should, it would go really great with food. And so even if you did save some for the next day and had it with food, I think you would not be disappointed. And then just because we have to geek out, I do get some pungent spice. So I do get some black pepper. And notice I'm vigorously swirling. So wine people, we're weird. We vigorously swirl things. And again, if you're kind of new to swirling, you can put your hand on the top and then do it like that, just so you don't spill. Because I've spilled. It's stained. Wine stains, and so if you're wearing like a light color, especially, you got to get new pants. And so sometimes covering it is a good idea. And then especially if the wine is really quiet, so really shy, you really have to really. So basically we're adding kinetic energy to help the molecules enter the gas phase as opposed to the liquid phase. So it's kind of a science-y thing. And so like you can go really hard, and like if you're not getting any nose because it's old or it's just really we call it an awkward period where it's not like just given its age, it's kind of like a gangly teen. It's just like awkward. And so you're not getting anything. And so you can be very kind of like physical, and sometimes it will come out. And it also, I think this wine probably would benefit from a decanting. last week we had someone kind of ask questions like, when do we decant? Why do we decant? And we do it so to oxidize the wine. So time in the bottle, what's gradually happening is the wine is oxidizing. Just like all of us are oxidizing every year, we're getting older, the wine does too. And so with that, we have a softening. So we have, young people, they're bold, they're, hard to be around. Then over time, they mellow out, they oxidize, they get more pleasant. And so the same thing with the wine. If you oxidize this wine by decanting and exposing it to air about maybe an hour before serving, you would notice a more gentle wine, a more feminine wine, and probably a wine that is probably a little more balanced as well.
Seth, with the previous wine, would you expect to be served that one like chilled, like at a restaurant that knew that what they were doing with wine?
It's a great question. So I remember I was in the city, and my girlfriend and I were at a Spanish place, and they literally, I think it was this exact bottle. Like it was a Grenache, like entry level. It was like a 2019, 2020. And what really annoyed me is like the restaurant, it was summer. And so the restaurant was like a little warm. And so it was, granted, I'm a little picky and kind of a douche, but like, it was like, I would say like 74, 75. And like the wine was literally 74, 75. It was on the mouth. It was just so hot because like alcohol, it's already kind of heat on the tongue, take a shot, it's warm. And so it was just so hot. So this wine, it's like most red wines, should be served around 60 degrees. We call it cellar temperature. This wine, especially because it is kind of young and vibrant, it could do really well, an extra 5 degrees colder. And if you're in that kind of environment, if you are, outside and you're not eating food, so you could have it serve it at like 55 degrees. That said, most people serve white wine too cold, so they put it in the fridge and then just take it out. And they serve red wine too warm. They just leave it on the counter and then serve it. So there is, no matter what, they're probably serving it wrong. And at a fancy place, they probably would serve this, around 60 degrees. But you probably, it's what you want. Some people, it's all about convenience, and so they don't want to have to put it in the fridge before taking it out and set a timer. And so like I get that, like it's not worth it. And so depending on kind of the experience you want, you can choose whether or not you want to cool it. Yeah, but great question.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Oh wait, I don't know if are we ready for the reveal? So we're gonna listen to what these people said. So medium depth, cherry red. You can read, but so they say orange rim. Let me get mine. I see some orange hues, but I would call it more brickish. So that's coming from over time. You have the polyphenols kind of falling out of solution, and you have kind of a lightening in color of red wine. And so you have that kind of oranging, and so that's coming from the oak and the time in barrel. So we, as it said, we have some, it doesn't say kind of, wood characters, but like it is kind of saying that. So smoke, I'm not getting smoke at a wood shop, but like I did smell that. It's not, I would call it a pine, though they call it kind of a coconut or a succulent herb with the air in the next review. So, it is the same note. There are classes of organic compounds, and some people talk about the specific one, but it's really just we're talking about the generic family, and so you're not really wrong if you say wood. But this wine, it almost tastes like olives. As in like it would go really well if anyone has like black olives and is willing to eat them. Oh yeah, all right, nice. I think it would go great, and it would be a great pairing. It is kind of a classic Spanish, or not with the meal, but you have it with bread, and it would be kind of a nice pairing. What do you guys think of the olives with the wine? That's good to hear. People in Spain would like you. Yeah, because that's what's amazing though. So like the reason the food and the wine of a local place go so well together is that like the food and wine traditions have evolved together over hundreds of years. They choose their wines based on the foods they eat there, and they choose what to grow in terms of grapes based on, or the opposite. So they choose their food based on the wines they have, and so like they just kind of go so well. And so olives, they were a Mediterranean phenomenon, and they go really well with Mediterranean wine, just because there's kind of an intelligence in this cultural tradition. So I'm glad it goes well. So a little pairing principle that we can try to take away from this is that Spanish food demands Spanish wine. And again, we're talking about Spain as a country and not the language. In a nutshell, Spain, it makes this wine called Rioja. Rioja is the most famous wine of Spain. That's the one thing I want you to take away from this, is that there is a wine called Rioja. It's pretty good. It goes really well with food. If you're at a Spanish restaurant, it honestly could stand up to a steak too. But I think we're going to keep it simple and say, if you're eating Spanish food, don't be stupid, order Spanish wine. Don't be that guy that orders like, Pinot Grigio at a Spanish restaurant. Like, no one likes that. You're not liked. And so order the thing that they're trying to push on you, because there's a reason they're trying to push it on you. Some things I think we want to think about as we kind of wrap up this tasting is that we found the first week we found a value. So last week we were in France, in Bordeaux, which is one of the most expensive regions. Next week we're going to be in Burgundy, France, which is the most expensive region. And so we want to think, these places with less of a cavalier history, less kind of a pompous attitude towards wine, and that it's more about the food and the wine. Because you go to Spain, they're not going to give you rambling stories about the wine. They're going to tell you about the food, and like they're going to serve the wine with the food because it makes the food better. And so you have these kind of more humble places where you have good value. And so I want us to consider that when we go to France next week, and we think about whether or not we can find value in France. This week we talked about the Spanish wines of France. So southern France, when there is good value, this Grenache, the most planted grape in the world, it's most planted grape for a reason. It does really well with other grapes. It's a pleasure to be around. And so we want to think, why a country would make Grenache, but also we want to think about where they would make Grenache. So it is a warmer climate varietal. Where is it not being grown in Spain? Spain, they also grow cool climate things, more like Tempranillo in the higher altitudes of Ribera and Rioja. And so we want to think, how could a country so small like Spain in comparison to the US have such a varied climate? How are they able to make so many different styles? And we want to think, when we come back to the US next week, we're going to go to, we're talking about Burgundian grapes, but we're going to go to Oregon and California. And those are places that are a little further apart than Spain is as a country. And we're going to see even more disparate difference in the type of wine. And I think to really understand the effect of climate on wine and grapes, you'll have to visit us next week. Thank you for coming this week. And I wish you the best on your various exams and endeavors. Any questions, feel free to ask.
Seth, I have a quick question.
Please, hit me.
You know how you were talking about like the different shaped bottles? Is that more like to help nurture the wine, or is it more of like a marketing thing?
Yeah, marketing. Like I wish there were a reason. I mean, so for champagne and like kind of the sparkling wines, like literally these bottles would not withstand the pressure. Like that wine had those bottles. Yes, it's required. It to like holds like 5 atmospheres of pressure. This one, it's all marketing. Just because like we associate in our brains certain shapes with certain grapes, and so they play on that. And there's kind of a tradition of it. So like in France, it's illegal to use a certain shaped bottle in a certain place. They have to use one as opposed to the other. They also have to grow one grape as opposed to the other. And so the kind of that history has affected us in other countries where we just kind of do the right shape just because we don't want to confuse consumers. But it is kind of like an artifact as opposed to like a reason.
Okay, so it does like nothing for like aeration and.
I mean, so it's funny though, like there are different size wines, right? So you can have a mini bottle, so we call it a half bottle, or you can have a magnum, which is a double bottle. And so, a bigger bottle, because of that surface area to volume ratio, it does age the wine differently than a smaller bottle where you have more surface area to the volume. So you do have a different rate of oxidation occurring. But in terms of the shape, most wines, because the neck is a certain width, have that width and that surface area being exposed regardless of the shape underneath. And so the shape underneath is more irrelevant. It's more the size of the area being exposed that becomes relevant over the long term with aging. But it's a great question.
Sorry, one more question.
Please.
So like comparing both of these bottles, like one, when you look through it has like a green, the Rioja has like a green hue versus the Fuego one has like a yellow hue. Does the color, is that again just like a marketing thing, or is it like they wanted to refract the light or whatever?
So you're right. So wine, I said dank before. So like it's supposed to be aged in like dark conditions. And so light is the enemy of wine. And just because it causes all of these reactions that I don't understand, but it fucks with the wine. And so what you want to do is you want it to be in a dark area. And so one way to make sure it's in a dark area is to have a bottle that's darker and doesn't allow as much light in. Granted, it's not, invulnerable. It's probably, they're different. There's green glass, there's brown glass. They probably, based on, what they wanted to market and what they usually use, it was probably more that, but there is something you don't want, white wines are often served or bottled in see-through glass because they're not expected to age as long. Whereas, for a red, you're not doing that for consumers' reasons, but also because you want it to possibly age in someone's cellar for, a few years if they desire it.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I love this shit,
Yeah, well, you're really good at it, so we're impressed.
Literally so impressed.
I'm gonna hire you for my birthday party. Next, I know you mentioned September. That's my birthday, so get your wines ready.
Yo, honestly. All right, guys. I'm glad you guys came, even though with like micro and everyone like freaking out about that. So
we're gonna
thank you for
catch
coming
up
through.
on more.
Yeah.
We just haven't been on top of our shit at least.
Yo, no, me too. I'm so behind. It's like unreal. I'm pretty overwhelmed actually.
But like, so.
What was that?
But like wine though, we'll know wine.
Yeah, no, and honestly, like in terms of life, it's probably more useful.
Yeah.